This is Spectrum.
From that point. And then we got to the point where I had a draft, and I added the backstory. The character Joe Green was the protagonist, the star of the book, so to speak. And
Yeah.
so we started adding this backstory of my own personal happenings, because Joe Green is kind of a haunted person that has these visions and interactions with these voices in his head, and these turns out to be aliens, and they're kind of his mentor and bring him through a kind of a transition period. So we ended up having a story put together loosely around 95. And then in 96, I contacted Bob Silverstein, Quicksilver Literary Agency, and he was excited about the book. And he said, well, you're an unknown, and you also need a little polish to your book. He says, I'm going to recommend Brad Steigersman, your co-author. Well, back then I didn't care if I gave away half the book to a co-author, because I didn't do it for the money. My sole purpose was to get the information out there.
Right.
And I had talked to several judge, advocate, general lawyers to know exactly, where that gray line was I didn't want to step across. And then their advice was, if I told people it was secondhand information or third-hand, and then I wrote it as fiction, I could pretty damn well write, whatever I wanted.
Right, that's true. So the characters in the book, they're based on, all of the characters in the book are based on people that you know, and these original people that you were met and had talked to and were angry about the suppression of the technology that should be out in the public.
Yes, there are a couple exceptions. The background officers, like at Groom Air Base, were fictional. One was General Buharnas, was mostly a composite of Colonel Sullivan, one of the greatest officers I ever served under. The wife and kid were fictional. I wanted her to stay on, and we started talking, and then it's
right.
Once you get above Indian Springs and Mercury, it's like I said, it's just all gravel roads. So we're going with this bus, and that fine sand and silt would come to leak through the window. So it's like, the air wasn't that good, I'll just put it that way.
Okay.
And we couldn't see anything, and there was a guy with an M16 that checked our ID cards when we got on the bus, and he was sitting in the front seat, turned sideways, and we were told to shut up, sit down, and we shut up and sit down.
Right.
And I could tell there's probably a lot of people that had never been there like me. I don't know, that was just instinctive, because, they were trying to see out the front. You could see them keep looking at the front of the bus, trying to see out the front window. And so we got there right before daylight, and we were escorted. There was 4 or 5 military policemen with M16s, and there were several of us going to the avionics and electronics building, and they had us put on these black welder's goggles. I mean, that's as close as I can describe them. And you can only see, 50, 60, 70 feet in front of you, and then it got blurred. I don't know if there was some kind of polarization or how they did it, but I'm such a big guy, I had such a big head that I kind of just pull it down just a hair, so when I looked down at the ground, I could look over them and I could see around me.
Ah, tricky.
Yeah, well, I could have got shot, I guess, but I mean, my curiosity is just, curiosity killed the cat. So
yeah,
I went into this building, and I was told that I couldn't leave the room. I had to ring a buzzer if I needed help or if I needed to leave the room. So I sorted out, I was looking at the data sheets and the history logs and some of the problems they had with one of the pieces of a crypto, and it was hooked up to a satellite uplink with docile, direct orbital communication link, which was strange to me because it wasn't satellite frequencies or typical coding we would use to transmit or receive information from a satellite. And it led me to believe, after looking at the circuitry and spectrum analyzer and everything else, that they were actually communicating with some kind of vehicle.
Oh, okay.
That you could tell with the equipment if the vehicle was moving away or closer. It's like, radar signals that measure the lapse between two pulses, and they can tell, distance of aircraft. It's very basic stuff. And then when I got into the computer, there was a clock frequency that's like 1 gigahertz, which was just astounding to me because back then.
When was back then? What was the time frame?
I believe it was 77, summer. It was 77 or 79. I was up there several times. Actually, I think it was 79. So anyway, this is a couple years before the Apple came out, and its clock rate was only 1 megahertz, a million hertz. But a gigahertz is 1,000 times faster than 1 megahertz.
Right.
So the NSA had a computer, it was huge, couple of bays, had a computer that had a clock speed of 1 gigahertz. Now, we didn't see 1 gigahertz processor until the, not the 486, it was the first, it was after the 486. What was that?
Before we seen a gigahertz? Oh, that's...
Well, no, the 486s, and then they came out with the Pentium 1, I guess.
Yeah.
And it was 1 gigahertz, and that wasn't until, 97 or 8.
Mm-hmm.
So that was, 20 years later before the commercials caught up with it. Now, you ask anybody that's ever worked on sophisticated equipment for the NSA, and they'll tell you, which I totally believe, that the National Security Agency's equipment is 20, 30 years ahead of what the public knows.
Yeah, no doubt.
So, anyway, I was working on this stuff, and I needed to get to the other end of the computer cables, which went through a wall to another room. So I rang the buzzer. The guy outside with the M16 opened the door, and I said, I need to go over here and test that cable out. He said, you can't do it. I said, well, hell, the equipment's hooked together. It must be similar. And I said, that's where all the computer information is coming from. He said, write down what you need. I'll give it to them, and they can test it, and they'll write you back. When I could have just walked into the next door of the next large area,
Right.
So, anyway, we got everything resolved, repaired the equipment, and then the other problems came up, and I was there several days, went back the next week, and the only reason I actually ended up there the first time was because the guy that repaired the equipment had a death in the family and went on emergency leave, and they had nobody else up there qualified with the clearances that I had.
Right.
So when they called back Detachment 3 saying, hey, we need a replacement for this guy, Detachment 3 said, well, we don't have anybody right now. And then that's when Dave Cassing, Senior Marshal Dave Cassing at Detachment 3 at Edwards, said, I know a guy at Nellis that I believe is qualified on that. And that's how my name got picked.
Right, okay. So okay, go ahead.
So basically, I had, first time I ever saw the flying triangle was at Edwards Air Force Base with Jerry Ellerick, and we were on top of the Fairchild A-10 hangar where they were doing research and development on the A-10 Warthog. And it was about, I guess, around midnight.
Now, just to be clear, when you say the flying triangle, you mean what's commonly referred to as the TR-3B, that flying triangle that's thought to be alien technology.
Yes.
But
yes.
but this is a version made by humans, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Now, originally it was called the TR-3B Astra, but obviously once they get out of testing and go operational, they always change the names of these black aircraft. And the flying triangle is not an aircraft; it's a platform. In other words, it's a flying platform. There is a difference.
Okay.
We'll get into that. But I mean, I wasn't a science fiction fan that much, and never believed in UFOs, even though I'd heard stories, throughout my Air Force career. So we're on top of this hangar. It's about midnight, and my buddy Jerry points up. And he says, "Hey, look up there." I said, "Where?" And he kept pointing around. And he says, "There's three triangular lights, and they're getting bigger." And I looked. I said, for a while, I'm saying I don't think so. And then they slowly got bigger and bigger. This triangle expanded. So the only conclusion we could come to, it was coming closer or coming down in altitude. So finally, this thing got to where it was the size of the moon. I don't know the actual distance. I'm guessing maybe 10,000 feet or something like that. And then all of a sudden, this thing it took off so fast to the north from Edwards, which had been towards northeast or whatever, towards Nevada. I mean, it's like it jumped, and then it went so fast it just disappeared. So we thought it was some kind of probably classified aircraft, and it never entered our minds it was UFO. Neither one of them said, "Oh, look at that UFO."
Right.
Because you see all kinds of strange things out in the desert between Edwards and Nellis and Groom Air Base, because there's just a lot of weird stuff up there flying.
Right.
So the second time, we were on our motorcycles, Brian and Jerry and Ray and a couple other kids, I don't remember their names. And it was right at sunset. And all of a sudden, this huge shadow comes over. It's like a cloud, a dark cloud will go over you. You see a shadow on the ground.
Mm-hmm.
And somebody hollered, "Look up!" And we looked up, and there was just this massive triangle and sky above us, and it was leaving a shadow on the ground, and it just scooted through the air. I mean, there was no sound, no vibration, no hum that I felt. It disappeared over the next mountain or hill or whatever, and that was it. So Jerry and I had started talking, and we speculated that it was the same thing we had seen at Edwards that night. So it wasn't until I was at Groom, the last time I was at Groom Air Base, Area 51, it was in the evening. No, I mean, it was still light, but it was getting later in the day. And I saw one sitting on the ramp. And my guess is it was the prototype model that was only 200 feet wide.
Okay.
But, I mean, it's like looking at a battleship and somebody telling you, "Oh, that thing can fly."